Michael Harrington has over 15 years experience in the alternate vehicle field, a fuel cell engineer with United Technologies for 8 years.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for taking your time and joining me here today to talk about our company, US Hybrid. We're a small company. We've got 3 divisions. The primary division is really focused on power electronics and converters. We do DC to DC converters, motor drives, inverters, those types of systems. That facility is based out of Torrance, California. We have roughly 80 employees there working on electronics design, integration, prototype vehicle, manufacture. We take old trucks and do conversions, so CNG conversions, LNG, battery electric, and now US Hybrid acquired a fuel cell company, which used to be a United Technologies company, and we've renamed it the US Hybrid Fuel Cell Engine Division, and that's right here locally in South Windsor, which is why he's having me sub for him. So that facility is located in South Windsor. It's about 100,000 square feet. We have about 30,000 square feet of it. Only about 10 to 15 employees, but our focus is solely on making the actual fuel cell itself that goes into these vehicles. Now, Abbas had been one of our suppliers back in the day when I was working at United Technologies, and he was doing a lot of the balance of plant components. So motor drives for basically the air blower or TMS system, the thermal management system for us, so coolant pumps, drives for that, variable speed drives, DC to DC converters for the old programs. The other company that Abbas has is called Mag Motor. They do small motor servo drives up out of Worcester. There's a few employees up there. So that's the US Hybrid in a nutshell, maybe a little over 100 employees with really a focus on hybridization and how best to integrate hybridization, what technologies make sense where, and there's a lot of field data and experience that he's had over the course of 30 some odd years. Myself, I've been working for 15 years in it. Abbas has another 15. So he knows what he's talking about. And you're right, he's got a crazy amount of energy. I don't know how anybody keeps up with that guy. So a little bit on the timeline. Let's see. I'm going to look at the microfiche screen in front of me because I can't really see the side ones. So what we're looking at here is from 1999, the introduction of US Hybrid. On the lower half, you can see that we've looked at all of the electric drive, and on the upper half, this is basically fuel cell integration. So there's been fuel cell buses, there's Hyundai Tucson vehicle. Mostly our focus now, though, is not on pass car. Toyota, the big OEMs for automotive, have now taken that completely over, basically. And I think fuel cells fit much better in a commercial vehicle application, where it's very difficult to have a battery that's large enough to do what you're looking for it to do. So going through the timeline, you can see this is UTC actually introduced what we called the PC40. That was a bus power plant, so it operated in AC Transit, Sunline in California. We actually had one operating here in Hartford for almost 6 years. Lots of good data from it. In addition, Abbas actually integrated other people's fuel cells, so other companies' fuel cells as well. So Hydrogenics, Ballard, lots of experience as an integrator. So US Hybrid is really a great integration company for understanding other people's equipment and how best to marry the different components together. On the electric side, there's lots of motor drive systems and DC to DC converters that were nearly impossible for other companies to do that he managed to pull off. I have no idea how, when you look at some of the topologies that he was looking at. But the overall marrying of the two companies of US Hybrid with the old UTC fuel cells technology has really helped basically bring us to where we are today, which is more of a fully integrated product, which you can now go up to with an ODB2 reader, and know the codes, scan it, find out anything with a system error. You have J1939 CAN compatibility. You basically have a much more serviceable item. So it's really improved the integration actually of the unit. Well, why do we do it? Well, this is really why we do it, and this is all the wasted energy that we're looking at basically sitting in traffic, running a diesel. So this is really just a slide more about hybridization and the drive that will eventually move us towards hybridization, whether it's hybrid diesel, hybrid CNG, or whatever the future is. I think it's going to be very difficult for any one of us to really argue the fact that you're going to be having a battery someplace in there to store that energy or recover it. Eventually, it's going to make the most economic sense to do. We've looked at, the really, really light stop-start, vehicles like the Hyundai Tucson mentioned, to, the 45,000 pounders, all the way up to the Class 8s as like port trucks and things like that. And what's really the trade-off? How much battery do you need? How much engine do you need? Forget if it's diesel or CNG or fuel cell. That's just a trade between, well, one, hydrogen's not everywhere, and two, what's the efficiency level and the upfront cost that you're looking at. So there's a good market here for improving the efficiency and recovering a lot of that wasted energy. And so US Hybrid helps bring companies to that market, doing demonstration programs of prototype vehicles. So our main product is an 80 kilowatt engine. It's rather equivalent to the Eurostar, but basically we're looking at 80 kilowatts of electric power. We do an electric drivetrain, which really integrates and allows you to take advantage of some of the subsidies and implement high efficiency transportation in the port areas where there's governmental support for reducing the smog and the emissions locally. So it's an early stage technology. You've probably seen a lot of startup companies looking at this type of technology. Toyota's had some recent press announces. Hino, they're starting to look at trucks and integration. So this is actually a very active area, and as well as in the China market. So China is actually dragging a lot of market volume with it, and so helping the fuel cell world, especially on the commercial side. So transit buses, port trucks, been very well, a lot of interest and a lot of development money is going into it. Now our technology, there's our core engine. So we have the overall engine here as integrated. The block, or the equivalent of the block, is our fuel cell stack, which is consistent of these repeat parts. We have our fuel supply system, which is nothing really more than your typical injector system. Right? We have a commercial turbocharger essentially, which you could basically pull off of a turbocharged car. And you have a thermal management system, which is just a heat exchanger, nothing crazy there. We run on 50/50 glycol. And then the thing that's nice here is we actually have, this is what the US Hybrid Torrance, California office really added to the party. This was a DC to DC converter that allows it to match and do whatever you want on the actual electrical bus. So you can charge your batteries, you can supply directly to your inverter, you can do current control mode, you can do power control mode, you can do voltage control mode. Pretty much whatever you want to tell it to do over J1939 it can do. Or it can operate independent. There's a start button. If you supply hydrogen, give it a place to put power, press the start button. There you go. Some efficiency numbers. So we say that hydrogen is very efficient. Batteries are very efficient compared to diesel, CNG engines, or even a diesel hybrid. This is kind of the boost in efficiency that you're looking at. So it's kilowatt hours per kilogram of a diesel fuel versus, say, a hydrogen supplied one. The big issue is obviously cost and supply of hydrogen. You can't exactly go get hydrogen at your local supply store. Well, you can actually. Jennings Road has actually got a hydrogen filling station that's about 1.5 miles away from here. So in the past, infrastructure has really been a holdup for it. Now we're starting to see the infrastructure starting to get put in place. There's 30 to 40 stations, refueling stations in California. They've really picked up along the port areas or basically where any refineries are. So you look at Houston, that area has a lot. You're looking at the Northeast, we've got 2 stations now. Toyota has actually really helped drag the infrastructure part along because they're trying to introduce the Toyota Mirai, if you might have heard of that. It's a commercially available vehicle that you can actually go lease. But from a efficiency perspective, the hydrogen combined vehicle is actually much more efficient than any of the diesel or LNG or CNG hybrids. It's really just a matter of what's the upfront cost and how much hydrogen do you have available. So we do all of our testing actually right here in Connecticut. We're one town over in South Windsor. We have a full setup where we can do tilt testing, simulated drive cycles for whatever customer profile you have. You've got a lot of start-stop, like a bus, basically picking up passengers and moving. If you've got port truck, if you've got information from, say, a hybrid vehicle that you've done, so you know how many kilowatts are coming in and out of the battery, you know how to size that engine appropriately. We have a lot of data from that, but we can run the exact profile that you're looking to do and evaluate how our system would do, on that particular profile. We have a series of products depending on which class vehicle that you're looking at, all the way ranging from 150 kilowatts down to a 10 kilowatt, which is really a small, more of a range extender type of application. Our main product is really the 80 kilowatt. Its intended target really is class 8, class 7 trucks. It does very well for steady load-based handling, where the batteries would basically pick up the transients, and it maintains your battery SOC. We've got a 40 kilowatt that's coming out. It's basically designed for class 6 and 7 trucks. So nice delivery trucks or small shuttle buses where it would package well into. What we've seen is as the volume of the fuel cell industry in general has increased, you might have seen press releases, it's kind of outside the field, for like Plug Power and Avera or Ballard. They're getting contracts for 10,000 units, these small units that work in Amazon warehouses and things like that. Well, so that's actually helpful to us because it's actually driving the whole supply chain to generate more. And so that extra volume is actually reducing the cost. So it's not nearly as expensive as it was 10 years ago. In UTC, if I was to try and make this 80 kilowatt unit, it would have cost me $500,000 or $600,000. Now we're a fraction of that cost, and it's actually something that we can start to talk about because the price is only going to continue to come down. So it's really about availability of the infrastructure. And now this is a chart that's really designed for how do you actually compare your refueling time. So diesel gives you by far the best refueling miles in a time frame. So what you're looking at here is miles that you get per every minute that you actually refuel. So for battery, if it's tiny down here, maybe you can recharge. I just heard earlier today someone's looking at fast charging a battery in an hour and a half. So if you can get your battery drains down on the shift, and then you can plug it into your really, really high powered charger, and then you can charge that battery up to 80% in an hour and a half. I mean, that's pretty good. But we're looking at typical times for refueling, in any kind of liquid or gaseous refilling station, 10 minutes. But your downtime is much nicer. You can run 24/7. The other nice thing is, I think the key takeaway here is we're not going to compete with diesel necessarily for miles per, but we are, or any kind of compressed liquid fuel is much better than the battery as far as recharging. That being said, I'm sure Elon Musk is doing his homework and he's finding other ways to recharge the battery. They're looking at like inductive charging in the ports so that when you stop to do an unloaded recharge or things along those lines. We still think there's a good business case actually for any kind of hybrid energy type of vehicle for those applications. So this is looking at some of the electric drive systems that US Hybrid specifically does. This is really looking at the motor classes that you have, between 200 and 320 kilowatt, depending on your drivetrain, and looking at the DC to DC converters that you might need for the auxiliaries. So how do you power the hydraulics? How do you power the air system? All the 24 volt. If you want to back charge the 24 volt, we've got converters for that. This is really the product list that we have right here. So we're looking at the 150 kilowatt unit, an 80 kilowatt, a 40 kilowatt, and a 10 kilowatt. All of these integrate over J1939. They all have like 4-point mounts basically, so it's really easy to use an engine hoist, just up and in and mount. We've integrated basically by removing the diesel out of a ProStar cab and dropping our fuel cell right down back into it, taking off the actual fuel tanks that you have, putting in the power electronics, the battery packs, pulling out the tranny, and then direct drive with the electric motor. And then where you'd have a sleeper cab, basically replacing that sleeper cab with an agility tank system, which they used to do compressed natural gas, and now they've actually moved from the compressed natural gas into also offering hydrogen systems. And so that whole combined vehicle, pulling and replacing, actually ended up 100 kilograms lighter than the original diesel when fully fueled. So that's actually a pretty big advantage over, say, the battery electric, where if you wanted to get that same range, you'd have to add significantly more, like 500 to 600 kilograms more, almost to the point where you're actually looking at, reducing the actual weight carrying capacity of the truck. So there's definitely some weight advantages as well as efficiency advantages to the system. And this is an example of a Class 8 truck that US Hybrid has integrated. And again, this is kind of what I was mentioning. So you can look at the back of this truck, and these are all batteries packs. These are basically battery packs here, battery packs underneath. I'm not sure how many tons of battery packs we put on that, but it did have a decent range, like maybe 100 to 150 miles. This is with, you know, a slightly older battery technology, so the battery technologies will definitely continue to improve. But I don't know if in the next 10 years or 20 years, they will actually get to the point where you're able to carry that amount of energy in it. But this is an example of the integration of the system. So you can see the battery pack itself is about 240 kilowatt hours. We did the converter, the drive system, the fueling system, or sorry, I should say the recharging system, and then as a demonstration basically to show what a Class 8 full electric truck could do. So it gives you an idea of the drive profile, allows you to understand how big does that really have to be in order to do what it needs to do. And you know, it's a good demonstration program, but it certainly doesn't have the range that you're looking for if you're running a port 24/7. So this was the Class 8 truck that we were talking about with the fuel cell integration. So basically the same layout, except the battery is now downsized from that 240 kilowatt hours to 25 or 26 kilowatt hours. So you have a 10x reduction in the battery size. So that saves you a heck of a lot of weight when you do that. You do have to add a fuel cell back in, but the big difference between a battery and a fuel cell is really the energy density. So if you look at how much the energy density the battery has, say take your Tesla, they have a 230 to 250, maybe even it's got 260 watt hours per kilogram now. That's just the cell. When you actually scale it up to the battery pack itself, you have to package roughly 6,000 of those little cells. So you actually have a much lower energy density. The overall fuel system, the fuel cell system itself, you know, if I just took the fuel cell alone and not the tanks, is roughly 3,000 watt hours per kilogram. So it's a crazy increase. Now you have to add the tanks in, and that's where you get all the weight. But even after adding the tank system in, I'm still at 700 to 1,000 watt hours per kilogram. So it's got a lot lower weight of the vehicle for adding for the same energy that you're looking for. And that's why after this integration was done, by reducing the battery pack size and taking out all the weight from the diesel and the fuel, it ended up being a lighter vehicle after the integration. We also just recently did a street sweeper. I thought this was actually a really nice application. Street sweepers happen to use water. Well, fuel cells happen to make water, so it works out fairly well. You know, the power, we did put an 80 kilowatt into this street sweeper. And then there's also a transit bus, but we've been doing fuel cell transit buses for 10 or 15 years. I think the street sweeper is kind of like the new application that's an interesting market. You know, it's a nice load, steady when you're actually sweeping, and the only time you really need the battery or any kind of horsepower is if you're traveling on the highway. And I don't know, I've never really gone past that many street sweepers on the highway, so it seems like a pretty good hybrid application actually, or nice steady load for the fuel cell to take. Now there was an actual integration picture to give you an example of how easy it is to kind of install our unit. They are really fast, but they're on salary, so they're not, I don't know why they're doing so fast. So these guys are out in California doing the integration. I think this is actually the Sunline bus. You can see the Sun bus next to it. But essentially the back of the bus opens up and you can just put the fuel cell in. There's 4 mounting positions for it, so it bolts down right to the actual frame. A few connections, basically your thermal system, which is really just, you know, glycol system for your radiator for cooling, your high voltage connection. There's an air connection, but everything on the fuel cell itself is provided, so there's no blower or different separate system that you have to mount someplace. Everything is actually in that actual unit. So you have to make the hydrogen connection, and usually the tanks on these types of vehicles are on top on the roof. But all in all, I think it really only took them about an hour to do the install, and then they're actually up and running. I think they're actually at coffee break right now, because then they come back and I see some lights flashing usually. See? So now you got power, and I was hoping they'd add the drive to this one, but this video unfortunately doesn't go through the drive. But you can see these are actually operational on the road now, so we're getting actual fleet data to understand how efficient these vehicles are in actual operation. We're also getting valuable data for understanding reliability. But a little bit towards that, when UTC actually operated this same technology, we had them operating for 8 to 9 years plus, all 20,000 plus hours on the road without a single stack failure. So we know that the engine and the technology itself is durable enough for the commercial engine market. It's just a matter of, the integration, because everything's, designed around integrating a diesel engine, and a lot of the other fuel cell companies are out there putting modules here and there and trying to package. So right now, I think the market is basically at the point of, show us what the energy efficiency is, show us what the value actually is for the dollars to actually make us or drive us to do this integration. And the government has been very helpful with DOE sponsorships for some of these programs, but we're getting to the point now where we're actually able to start competing with the CNG conversions, the LNG conversions, as long as you actually have access to hydrogen. That's the big, as long as you have access to hydrogen. US Hybrid has done and been doing these integrations for a long time. Hickam in Hawaii, which I wish I was able to actually take that position. I love Connecticut, but I'll take Hawaii for a little bit. But they've done pushback tractors for the government. This is not integrating one of the US hybrid fuel cells or the old UTC fuel cells. This is actually integrating a hydrogenics unit. So US Hybrid's real core strength is, they were able to integrate a bunch of different manufacturers and learn from the different manufacturers where they should be for doing this. So this is just the specs off of the actual street sweeper. So the 80 kilowatt fuel cell, 16 kilograms of hydrogen. It gives you like an 8-hour run, I think, or you get up to 60 miles an hour, 30 minutes of battery time only, right? So if for some reason something happens, you got 30 minutes to get home. But running off the fuel cell, you're running all day. The Pushback Tug specs that you just saw, a fuel cell plug-in hybrid electric refueler. So this is an interesting combination. When you think fuel cell, you think, I don't know what you think when you think fuel cell, but usually when you think hybrid, you're only using your engine to basically maintain that battery at the same state of charge. Here, you would go back and you would actually plug in the battery pack, so it's got a bigger battery pack, and then you've got the fuel cell, and it acts more like a range extender. So you get a lot more miles on it, and you can have a much smaller fuel cell. It's an interesting combination. The only real downside here is that you have to both plug it in and you have to have hydrogen. I know I don't want to have that at my house, but if I'm at a port or an Air Force base or something, I'm sure I probably have access to that. But just different types of vehicles that he's done. A cargo truck, so looking at the Class 6, what kind of loads, what kind of power is required for it, what's the best integration. We're looking at this as, after getting that data from the hybridization and looking at the duty cycles for it, we're saying that really the right size is about 30 to 40 kilowatts. Yeah, that battery is going to push you up to, kilowatt fuel cell, and the battery is going to push you to 200 kilowatts or more just to get the acceleration or whatnot that you want. But your average load for being able to do the whole drive profile that you're going to do, you don't need to maintain that. And so that's really the beauty of just hybridization in general. We've got an electronic weapons loader that we've got operating at Hickam as well. So the government has been kind to us. And then this is a battery dominant fuel cell. So this goes towards more of that plug-in hybrid application. So now you still have a very big battery pack, rather than having to recharge that battery pack, say midday, or only have a limited route, like a 4-hour route and then stopping. You can run basically the whole day with this larger battery with only maybe a 40 to 50 kilowatt hour or kilowatt fuel cell, basically acting as a range extender. So you can have a smaller battery pack than you would if you were trying to do this for a full 8 hours. And it just makes it, a lot longer range and a lot more valuable, I think. But it's got excellent transient capability, but it's not necessarily needing it. So we can load follow. We've actually, when we did the integration of this, we can load follow with the actual foot pedal, which is pretty good. We've got a turbocharger on it, but it's a low pressure system, not a high pressure system. So the spool up time for that turbocharger is very quick. So it really responds. But most people, we have the batteries now, so they just temper that. They use the battery power to the acceleration. And then we're looking at, really just what size motors do we typically use in these types of applications. And so, we're looking at 500 horsepower. We get lots of torque out of it for the larger guys, and then 240 kilowatts for the lower guys. But there's a lot of different vehicles that US Hybrid over the years has integrated, including even monorails. So it's, trains have been diesel electrics for a long time. And this is really the reason why we chose hydrogen. So, we did battery electric, we've done CNG, we've done LNG. And I know it's a bit of an eye chart, but when you look at the different colors we'll go by, so diesel's in red, hybrid diesel is basically in orange, CNG's in purple, full electric is in green, and then the fuel cell hybrid vehicles in blue. So this is basically, well-to-wheel fuel economy for commercial vehicles. These are based on drive profiles and cycles and years of collected data for different profiles. And looking at the efficiency of the systems, the fuel cell system always seems to come out on top. So I think really where we're at this point in the market is the initial upfront cost of the fuel cell and the availability of the hydrogen, and then getting past the initial ramp to get the volumes that we need to actually look at making this commercially viable. I think one way or the other, in another 10 years, you're going to see a lot more hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. And if the United States really doesn't do the dragging, we're already getting lots of pull from the Chinese to basically, hey, come in and, do these vehicles for us. Because I don't know how many people here have actually been to China, but the pollution over there is phenomenal, and they're looking for any way to solve it. And at 36% efficiency and not having to drag down my electric grid while I do it, they're very interested in it. So a lot of people think Hindenburg when they think hydrogen. I know I did as a kid when I watched that video. It's a stigma that's stuck with the industry for a very long time, and it really needs a bit of education to help kind of alleviate that. Being a battery guy, I worked in a battery field for a long time. I've watched lots of videos. I've actually abuse tested Tesla cells. And I'd much rather sit in a hydrogen vehicle than I ever would a battery vehicle, honestly. I feel much safer inside of it. When I turn off this fuel cell, it goes to zero energy. So it's not like it's maintaining a state of charge like a battery does. It's basically, there is no electrical energy on our fuel cell when you actually shut it down. So you can't hurt yourself. It's touch safe. It's 0 volts. That's not necessarily true for everybody's fuel cell, but that's certainly true for ours. The only thing that you have is basically the hydrogen tanks, which are, pressure tested to 2 times the actual pressures that they're at. They're then shot, I think, with a 50 caliber bullet or something to prove that the tanks can survive crashworthiness. And I'm actually doing the training on some of the firefighters that have to deal and know how to respond to these vehicles. They actually would much prefer hydrogen than they would any of the other liquids that are out there or gases that are out there. And it's really because gasoline spreads, goes on the floor, and then ignites someplace away, or natural gas even. So hydrogen basically has a flame that goes straight up because it's so buoyant. And you can actually, as long as you see it, it's much easier to deal with because it's so localized. But I thank you for your time, and I hope you guys at least feel a little bit more informed about U.S. hybrid, but really fuel cells and fuel and alternate engines in general, just to see where the industry is going to be coming. Probably in the next 10 years.
The fuel cell is more efficient. You said it's like 36% compared to diesel. Where is that cost-wise? Because hydrogen fuel is expensive right now compared to diesel. Where is that cost-wise with the efficiency ratio?
So, yeah, right now mostly hydrogen's made from reforming of methane. So you're still paying for natural gas to produce the hydrogen. Even if you're actually looking at, say, the greenies want to do like electrolysis, so you never have any carbon emissions, so no CO2. Now you're paying for the electricity to make the hydrogen. So from a cost perspective, I think it's at $5, I believe, a kilogram right now. So that's roughly the diesel equivalent. It's actually, I think, on par, a little bit worse right now for it. So you're more getting the added benefit of the zero emissions than necessarily for the actual cost. When that's the price right now. 10 years ago, hydrogen was actually cheaper than diesel. Not as much use. There's lots of surplus of it, so you could go buy it. It made sense. Market changes. Now there's more people demanding hydrogen, so now the price goes up. So it's really, how much is the supply versus how much are people pulling it. So now you're starting to see more demand, but not as much supply, because the only people making it are, leftovers from the refineries, or, people really trying to use electrolyzers, which is a difficult source. There are other economies, island economies, that are finding basically load shifting. We think of the grid as day and night. So I'm going to use my solar panels during the day and use my battery at night. And that's how I've always thought of it, right? That's how I'm going to load level across this new microgrid system. Well, I just ran in, maybe 6 months to a year ago, companies that were thinking about load shifting or level shifting on a yearly or seasonal basis, where they're saying basically, I've got this excess power, so I'm just going to, I can't fill my battery because my battery's already filled. It's meant for this daily use, but I've still got so much sun, I'm just going to electrolyze it and turn it and store it as some other fuel. You could do that with pumped hydro if you wanted to do that. But then, then you get this seasonal shift where they have a storage capacity. And as you start to see that grow on the grid, I think you'll actually see, prices of some of these fuels actually come down significantly. But for right now, the source, diesel still makes more sense from an economic standpoint, even with the added benefit of the efficiency. The only thing the diesel really just doesn't have is the actual, pollution benefit.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah.
Apologize for box security.
No worries.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.